the presentation, my laptop crashed down. I hope I have a better start today. Okay, so you are probably aware that the number of female gamers is nearly balanced, male and female gamers is nearly balanced, but still the video game culture is ruled by men and masculinity. And diversity is surely no main feature of the associated video game industry. So sexism as well as bro culture in the workforce have been publicly visible during or through Twitter campaigns, for example, or as well through media reports, as you can see here. So studies also showed that the domination of masculine views impacts the way that games are designed, and games that include female participation during the development process might reduce stereotypes embedded into game mechanics and also in character design. So the notions of doing and undoing gender have been proposed by scholars as a way to reflect on gender performativity in everyday life, for example, in gendered working organization and environments. So we believe that analyzing gendered processes in video game production seems to be a helpful approach to shed light to those dynamics. For this purpose, we conducted a qualitative study in a German video game company. And here we followed notions of feminist participatory action research and institutional ethnography to make the viewpoints of the women who are employed in the company central to the research, starting with their everyday experiences. At the beginning of the research collaboration, we decided together with representatives from the company to focus, from a gender perspective, on ways to foster processes of talent acquisition, development, and retention. And the background of the employees of this company is quite mixed, with 19 nationalities. Roughly 60% are from Germany, while 14% are foreigners. And by April 2018, the proportion of women employed in the company estimated 16%. In terms of background, duration in the company, task, responsibility, we were able to achieve a quite diverse mix of female participants who are employees of said companies. So the tasks range from producer or project manager to concept artist, quality assessment, so game testing, human resources, communication, and UX. And 3 participants were also foreigners. So you can see we had a quite diverse mix here. For data collection, we chose a mixture of qualitative methods. So firstly, we conducted interviews. Secondly, we used observation, more precisely shadowing. And here we shadowed 2 participants on their ordinary working days. And the coding process of this data then led to thematic narratives, which were used as hooks for a focus group discussion. And this then sharpened our themes. Now we will present some of them in the following. Our findings propose that the women are confronted with subtle notions of masculinity throughout their chronological process within the company that is displayed on the slide. And this is not the result, it is important to mention, this is not the result of malicious intent, but it is rather the result of unreflective, established, taken for granted structures. So onboarding or getting to know the corporate culture, putting the existing skills to use and developing the own skills and fostering the own career. So let's take a look at the first step of this process, onboarding and getting to know the corporate culture. When getting to know the corporate culture and you're onboarding into the corporate culture, it becomes obvious that the company adopts a rather geeky gaming culture as the corporate culture. So nearly all of our participants identify as gamers, and they also identify themselves as geeks. And that's why the women generally felt a fit right from the very beginning in terms of mentality. And they also described the atmosphere within the company as like a family. Despite this, entering a male-dominated field as a woman is considered to be a challenge by our participants. So asserting oneself as a minority in such environments, as well as building bonds with other co-workers, male or female, right from the very beginning or right from the start might be an important task. So we shadowed participant 4, and we also shadowed her 2 female co-workers in the process. And this revealed a very interesting insights in terms of group dynamics amongst those women. So while our shadowing participant 4, her co-worker came into the room, exclaiming in frustration that they constantly have to undertake the duty of brewing coffee. So indeed, we observed this pattern as well. So employees, mostly men, are constantly passing on the responsibility for brewing coffee. And this sounds familiar, doesn't it? So this is also in line with other research, which showed that women in organizational environments are volunteering unrecognized social tasks to a higher degree than men, and that masculinity can be expressed symbolically also in this way. So, understandably, the three women were rather unhappy with this uncooperative behavior by their peers, and they decided for a very self-confident approach by creating and printing a meme, which was then hung at the coffee kitchen. And the co-worker remarked that it was a group effort. So, I mean, this is on the face of it, of course, a fairly trivial example, but it does indicate the way in which women need symbolic support in order to assert a certain position, and this support then becomes more natural also or more available with increasing numbers. So the next step after onboarding is putting the existing skills to use. And despite being proud of their skills, several women mentioned that they reported that they are in conflict with a gendered working environment. So this might lead to a feeling that the own takes, perspectives, and skills are actually devalued. So participant 7, for example, described that her emphasis on emotionality, which she considers a feminine take, this creates backlashes at times when discussing UX design aspects of game. And this is clearly an indicator of how masculine values can dominate the outcome of design processes. So expressing agency in a self-confident way and voicing contrary opinions is sometimes or by times a challenge for all participants. The narrative of participant 2 reveals rather similar dilemmas. So now she's a lead herself, and she had a female executive at this company for the very first time who showed a very different perspective on leading employees. She described her as someone who was super balanced, who didn't profile the ego so much, who was very calm, and that felt really good. And such experiences with female role models reflect different conceptions of what is to be effective, and this should then be encouraged by the company. The last step then of this chronological process would be fostering the own career. And participants reported that there are numerous opportunities for career development, which the company offers, and that promotion is generally not uncommon, but they also stated that taking time off for courses often comes with dilemmas because of a project-first mentality being present in the company. So participant 1 said, "There's so much work to do and I feel guilty whenever I go to a training." Managing those time dilemmas might generally be equally difficult for all employees, but, and now it's getting interesting, our female participants feel especially disadvantaged when coping with such dilemmas because of their tacit signals and gender roles, and they are fearing that they're stigmatized as being pushy or bitchy when they are voicing their opinions, when they are showing agency, or when they are fostering their own career ambitions. So our paper, of course, offers more insights as well as a lengthy discussion, and I can only mention some of our thoughts here briefly. So what are some of our implications for undoing gender in a video game company? So we found that policy initiatives can have unintended impact. So the adoption of a gamer mentality is highly encouraged by the corporate culture and by HR as well, and the employees are actually proud of their geeky working environment, which is then influenced by the gaming culture. This definitely is a strength, but it can also create barriers and reinforce masculinity in the workplace. And this might also explain why many companies seem to be blind towards certain market opportunities. So companies have to reconsider their image, and they also have to reconsider their corporate cultures to make female gamers consider a career in game production as a serious option from the very beginning. So changing the structures then might also change the end products of the game, as we had examples of how this can also influence the game design in the end. We furthermore believe that an organizational appreciation of different kinds of, for example, team membership, leadership, perspective on games design, etc., can then encourage diversity in many regards within the company. So ensuring that voices are heard is often the responsibility of leads, and more women in lead roles can then also serve as role models as well. So put differently, the support of different strategies and perspective should be made more natural. This is an implication. Okay, I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
We have plenty of time for questions. They are in the middle.
Hello, Penny Sweetser from Australian National University. Thank you for your talk and for your research. I just had a question. I noticed that you didn't have any women in technical roles in your sets, programmers, designers, or even technical artists. Could you comment on that?
This is a very fair point, and it's just a result that there are not so many women in technical roles employed at this company. We mentioned this as a limitation, definitely, of our study, but we were happy to cooperate with interested female participants from the in general. So, as I said, it is a limitation, but do you have a further question considering this? So, do you think that the study would have changed, for example? Or?
Possibly. I just wondered if there was a reason behind it. I suppose as a follow-up, there's 16% women in the company, but I wonder how many of those women are in development roles as well, as opposed to HR or...
Not so many, So as I said, it's action research, and we are now in our third iterative cycle, and during our third cycle, we had one female participant who was then a coder, so the first of our study, so not so many in this company,
Any other questions or comments?
Dees Postma, University of Twente. Thanks for your wonderful talk. I was wondering, does your research also carry implications for hacking feminine cultures?
No. What do you understand as a feminine culture in this context? So, do you mean in terms? I mean, those are masculine cultures, right? So,
so your research focused on a context which is dominated by men, right? So, but I can also imagine there are cultures that are dominated by females, right?
Like, for example, other duties, but they are out of scope here. So.
But I was wondering maybe your work carries also implications to those kind of cultures.
That's an interesting question. I mean, we're talking about doing and undoing gender and getting rid of those gender notions in general, so or gender role notions. So I think you can say more broadly that the concept of doing and undoing gender as an analytical hook can be used for studies to take different perspectives, and this could also be like how to hack a feminine culture. But no, we have no data on this because, let me quickly go back to this slide. It is actually a feminist study. So we were perceiving this practical problems, and we were looking for solutions for the practical problems. So maybe you can ask for a masculine study, and then we can talk about those questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have time for one more on the next speaker
Oh.
Adrian Schneider from Queen's University, again. I was wondering, this is just something I noticed. Yeah. Okay. Something I noticed was that one of the, I don't remember which one, but one of the interviewees felt as though she were being discouraged from making emotional arguments. And she perceived that as being as it being a feminine thought process that was stymied by a masculine culture. To what extent could that be a stereotype on behalf of the interviewee? Because maybe the people that were discouraging the emotional reasoning actually didn't like emotional reasoning, just for its own sake.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and of course we are just displaying the experiences of our participants here. I think there are numerous studies which show those differences between feminine and masculine takes, and we just showed the difficulties of our participants in those environments. So it was more descriptive here in this case, but we can catch up later perhaps. That's an interesting question.
Thank you.
Yeah.